Anything more you remember from? Oh yeah, any stories about, like, I heard stories that it was rumored that Churchill maybe was a reservist, or
There were always stories. The one that I heard the most was about Lincoln,
yeah,
and the rationale was that the United States as a federation type of government was the model for world government, and had the South been allowed to secede, then it could have been hundreds of years before a new federation type situation might have arisen. And so, and I think, and just from a personal point of view, I mean, I think if you look at most of Lincoln's biographies, they'll say there was one thing and one thing only he was totally dedicated to, and that was the preservation of the Union at all costs.
yeah,
And look at the suffering he went through. So, I mean, it makes total sense. I don't know, but it
yeah,
makes total sense to me that might well be the case.
yeah. And he didn't even really want to be president. He
Right.
said he just had
He
to.
just had to, he knew that, I'm sure he probably felt inside that he had some sort of a calling, and he answered it. And
Mm.
I've heard the name Churchill mentioned, but I don't remember Christie or the other ones mentioning it. Other people have, but I
Yeah.
don't specifically remember her mentioning him.
Yeah, and it's like there's probably so many
But yeah,
people out there who have
yeah,
been.
yeah.
Do you want to share anything? Well, you were talking about the Moody Blues and some other bands that you later
Mhm.
on found out were readers. And it's interesting to hear like how they moved you, or how.
Yeah, well, I was in my 20s on an intense search for spirituality, and the Moody Blues from the late 60s through about the mid 70s did a series of about 6 or 7 albums, CDs during that time that to me had the most philosophical, spiritual lyrics of anything that I knew about. And I'm pretty sure that there was an article in Rolling Stone with one of the Moody Blues who talked about his reading of the Urantia Book. And then when I read that section in the Urantia Book about the saber-toothed tiger and the caveman, and how we need to see a bigger picture to understand people's motivations, understanding would lead to compassion and to loving your fellow man. And when I heard from the one CD called The Question of Balance, the last cut, number 10 on there, is called The Balance. And to me, that's just a song about that whole, understanding leading to compassion, leading to love. And so to me, I could see a direct, but that's just obviously, my interpretation.
Yeah. So did you feel like their music was somehow spiritually stimulative?
The most of any group that I've ever heard, I know of.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would listen to their music. I mean, Timothy Leary, the LSD. I mean, they wrote about a lot of the different things that were going on, and some of the songs, 60-foot leaps that's so absurd. I think that was, one of them said it was really about just walking on the moon. But of course, I'm thinking of the mansion worlds, how we'll be able to glide and won't have these physical bodies, and just be able to move so much more freely and so on. So probably I might have read too much into it, but there just were so many neat songs that I really loved, that just really just got me a little high just from the music. And I just felt there were a lot of consistencies with ideas in the Urantia Book there.
Yeah. And then I think you mentioned one more. Was it Santana?
Santana was, one of my other favorite groups, along with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And of course, we all know now that Santana, I found out, has been a long time, reader of the Urantia Book. But I don't know that any of his lyrics ever expressed that. But he was just, there was something in his music, and the way he could play that guitar that just always really, fit me and vibrated right with me, I guess, is the way to say it. So he was always one of my favorites. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to say anything maybe about what you do for a living, or how the Urantia books affected your life, or something like that?
Well,
Or maybe, and also how did you already say how you found the Urantia Book?
okay, so I went into service after high school, and I started college when I got out. And after about 2 years, I realized the professors had more knowledge than I did, but they didn't have the truth and the wisdom that I was really looking for. So I turned to Eastern religions, New Age, all that kind of stuff, and living with my brother and another guy, we were renting a house, going to college, and one day a roommate walked in, and in a very disdainful tone, he says, "Here, you like stuff like this." And okay, so I just started, opening it up and kind of reading, and I was really drawn to it. And so I had a 2-week semester break, and I decided, okay, I'm going to see what's wrong with it, because everything I'd gotten into had some truth, but when you got into it too deeply, then there was like, man, I'm not so sure about that. So I sat down and I read 7 to 8 hours a day for 2 weeks just to get through the first 3 parts. I thought I already knew about that guy Jesus, so I wasn't going to read that. But after reading it, I was totally convinced that no group of humans could have been so reasonable, so logically consistent, and so spiritually insightful. So shortly after that, I'm only 3 hours from Chicago, so I thought, okay, I'm going to drive up there. Who's the guru? Who's making the money and all that? And I was met by a guy named Jim Mills in a pair of slacks and a rumpled shirt, and he said, "Come on in," and we had a wonderful conversation, and the whole attitude was, hey, if you like this book, come and join us, and if you don't, it's okay. I mean, there was no pressure. There was just none of the stuff that sometimes surrounds some of the other things. And so I went to some of those early conferences there at 533. The first one, I think, outside of 533 was probably Kendall College. And so I met, some of the Christy and some of the people up there. But probably the one I was closest to and got to know the best was Meredith Sprunger. Been there for a while.
What year was that?
That I found the book?
Yeah.
1970.
1970.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. Do you want to say anything about like your work as a teacher now, or how the Urantia books,
Well,
been
I
a
tell
role in your
people
life?
when I first found the Urantia book, it made my eyes light up. It was just this resonation within me, and my eyes would light up. And here it is, over 50 years later, and it still makes my eyes light up. I mean, how many things are ever gonna do that? So to me, it's just been, I'm incredibly thankful. It's helped me develop a strong faith and relationship with God. And then about 30 years ago, I began sort of a just a daily communion with God type thing, and I've been doing that pretty regularly, and that's been wonderful. And so I sometimes hate to think where my life might have led, without